Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. It's been 4 years since a state-appointed emergency manager switched Flint's water source to the Flint River, resulting in lead-tainted drinking water. A public health emergency was declared in this city of nearly 100,000 people, and criminal charges were brought against several state and local officials. So, where do things stand today? Flint Mayor Karen Weaver is here to bring us up to date. Thanks for being here, Mayor Weaver.
I am glad to be here. I really am.
Yeah. So we had some news recently that I think can only be described as a setback in the efforts to try to make this right. Talk about what happened and what effect it's having.
So I think you're talking about the stopping of the bottled water by the governor.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And I think it was a bad decision by the governor to do that. And what he said was the water is testing good, so you don't need it anymore. And one of the things I said to him is, I'm aware of the test results we're getting. I mean, you know, why wouldn't I be paying attention to that?
Right.
And they are better, you know, and we're glad they're better. Who wouldn't want good water? I mean, everybody deserves it. Why wouldn't we want good test results? I said, but our fight is we have not finished with the lead service line replacement.
Right.
We're almost halfway through. And one of the things we were told, and EPA has not changed their stance, was that when you're doing that amount of construction across your city, that those old pipes, lead particulates can break off and get into the system.
Right.
And so we still have to be able to protect ourselves. It's still a public health issue. And so that was why it was so important for the bottled water distribution to stay in place.
Yeah.
The other thing was the test results we were getting back from the schools. 90% of the results were good, but 10% we were still getting very high results in our schools. And the third thing was it's a matter of trust.
Yeah.
You gave your word. You said that those pods would stay open indefinitely until we got through the replacement of those bad pipes. And we knew it was only going to be at longest a 3-year process.
Right.
And to, you know, do that, you know, I could have gone with things are better. Maybe you don't need as much bottled water. We can go from 8 cases a day to 4 cases. We can go from 4 water distribution sites to 2. But they needed to stay in place because we still have families where the pipes haven't been changed.
Where the pipes aren't changed?
And while we can argue that the water tests good, we have homes that test high because the in-home plumbing, the fixtures have been damaged as a result.
There's all kinds of residual effects of this that still mean people don't have clean water.
Exactly.
You know, Michelle Wolf, the comedian.
Thank you, Michelle Wolf.
At the correspondence dinner, the last thing she said is, Flint still doesn't have clean water, and that's still true.
Well, like I said,
in some cases.
In some cases, because like I said, it may test good, but if your pipes haven't been changed, if you've got plumbing that has been destroyed, there's still an issue. There's still an issue. And so, you know, we said...
When you ask the governor what's going through his mind when he either makes these decisions or signs off on them, what does he say to you? You
know, well, I explained all of this to him. And for him to have the remark that he did, which was Flint needs to get over it, I don't know. I thought it was just a very callous, insensitive remark, especially
Does he say those kind of things to you?
He said that in the meeting to me, yes, and told me that I needed to come back when I had a different conversation. I said, I'd like to have a different conversation, but right now the conversation is staying the same. You know, I had brought, it was so interesting because he wanted to talk about economic development, and we have been making progress with economic development. And I've taken my new economic development director to the meeting as one of the people that went, hoping that the conversation would go well and we get to talk about that as well. But when he told me, you know, come back when you're ready to have a different conversation, I said the conversation is not going to change when we still have issues with our water. You know.
So what are we looking at in terms of the timetable for pipe replacement, which you said you're about 50% through? And then I think the bigger question is, at what point do you feel like the people of Flint will be able to trust again that you go to the faucet, you turn the faucet on, and you're not worried about what's coming out?
You know, it's interesting because, you know, some people may never. Some people may never, but we do want to go by the science. And right now what we've said is let us get all of those bad pipes out and have good results over a stable period of time. But what I've been pushing for and looking for is sign off from the medical community, the public health community, the science community, because we needed them to, even though anybody knows brown water is bad,
Yeah, sure.
but we did need them to validate that with data, and so we want them to validate the results that we get that it's good. And so that's who I'm using to determine when we can say, okay, we're through this.
Good.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned economic development, and there is really not just good news, but really good news, surprising news coming out of the efforts that you're making to try to build the city's economy.
Right. I mean, and you know what? We can even start with something as basic as when we were handing out the water.
Yeah.
We said we want Flint people getting paid to do that.
To do that work.
Exactly. Yeah. To package up the food, to do the education going door to door, to let people know the proper use and maintenance of the filters. Let's hire Flint people. When we got the construction contracts, we made sure that the contractors were from the city of Flint and then Genesee County. So we wanted to take care of our own first, and we were very good at doing that. I was excited to be able to have one of the contractors is an African-American company, W.T. Stevens, and it was the first time in Flint's history that we had an African-American company get a multi-million-dollar contract. And they've hired a lot of people from Flint, and so have the other companies. They have hired Flint workers, and they're from Flint, the companies. But we just, one of the things I was telling you earlier is Lear Corporation has come into Flint and built a factory. They've invested $30 or $31 million in the city doing this, and it's the first time we've had a factory built in Flint in over 30 years.
Wow.
I mean, Mott College is building a culinary arts school in downtown Flint. We have new housing going up. The Hilton Garden Inns is getting ready to get started. So things are happening in Flint, and to have, I need to give a big shout out and thank you to the Kellogg Foundation, because they gave us a grant and they gave it to the city.
Right.
People have asked about all this money. Nobody gave money to the city.
The city government,
other than for pipes.
Right.
And then Kellogg for us to get economic development started back up from the city, because that was something that we did not have at City Hall, was our own economic development department. And so it's under the leadership of Roderick Smith, who had been down in Detroit and previously had been in New Orleans. So he's heading up that department. We've had him for almost a month, but he's hired staff and really pushing that forward. So we're excited about the economic development, because, when there's a crisis, economic opportunity comes.
Yes.
And so that's what we wanted to focus on.
So one of the things that I say over and over about Flint is that, this crisis in some ways just highlighted issues surrounding lack of opportunity, lack of investment in neighborhoods, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
That made this much worse, obviously, than it needed to be. Talk about the things that will change the lives of people who live in Flint, people who live in neighborhoods where I would imagine now, if you own a house, for instance, in a neighborhood in Flint, it's probably harder to sell that house than it was before.
And you have to make sure, if you're trying, you have to go and show them that, yes, I've had my pipes changed, and then you have to go get the results from the water testing that other people don't have to do.
I mean, in some ways, it's not a fair question, I guess, because it's asking you, how can you solve poverty? How can you solve lack of opportunity?
Well, you know what? It's interesting you brought that up, because when we talk about economic development, one of the things that I liked about Rod was he said he wanted to make it across the board. He said it's easier to bring in, yes, I can just focus on getting these $100,000 jobs, $150,000 jobs. He said, but we need jobs where they're getting $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. This needs to go across all, all different groups, and everybody needs an opportunity to be able to work. And that's what we're looking at. And that's why it was just so important to hire people from the city of Flint. And I'll have to say, one of the things W.T. Stevens has done has really given a lot of people a second chance. And hired, people that had had a record before.
That's a huge issue.
And that's a huge issue for so many. So we've looked at those kinds of things as well.
I'll ask this. It's, again, maybe not a fair question.
Okay.
What's the point at which you think you'll be able to put this all behind you and say, hey, we're only moving forward now?
Well, you know what? That's what we say anyway. Yeah. We say we are only moving because this was a stumbling block. It did take us back. But one of the things we know, and one of the things we always say, is how strong and resilient we are.
Sure.
And we don't lay down, we don't give up, and we continue to fight. And so while this may have been a stumbling block, we're going to continue to move forward. It was so interesting because the very next week, we went on with the press conference because we were introducing our economic development team, and we said we're not going to let that stop us, and we still want people to see what we're doing in Flint and the good things that are going on, because there are you know, really great things going on there when you look at all of the colleges and universities that we have, and the you know, all of the hospitals, and when you look at our transportation system, there's a lot to build on. And one of the good things about Flint is it's small enough where you can start seeing some immediate impact. And so I think when people come back, I've heard them say, oh, I was here a few months ago, but I can see change.
I see it moving.
And people are excited because even, I remember when Lear was hiring, they were the first 100 jobs because they're bringing about 600 to 650 jobs. 100 or 150 of those will be transplants, but all of those others, they want to hire Flint people.
People who are
so
there.
They had 100 jobs to start, and we had about 2,500 people lined up for those jobs, just to show people, you know, because sometimes they'll say, oh, they just want a handout, they're lazy.
They want to work.
These people want to work, and they were there.
All right, Mayor Karen Weaver, it's always great to see you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all the work in Flint.
And we will continue. Thanks.